Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back to another edition of PreMarket PulseScan with yours truly, Dex the Algo Capitalist, aka the Vulcan, coming to you live from PulseWaveTrading.com, home of the world's famous PulseWave price trigger reports that we put right in your hand each and every trading day. What's good? What's cracking? Hopefully everybody had a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Hopefully you daddies out there had a wonderful Father's Day, spending time with your kids like every father should. You don't need to be told that. You already know that. Because if you're a real daddy, that's how you're built. That's what we do. That's what we do. We put that work in. Doesn't matter how old or how young your kids are. Real fathers of the world stand up. All right, so as you know, as I am accustomed to doing, on the weekends I chill. Doesn't matter if it's a holiday or not. I decompress. I take a step back so that I can gather myself, so I can be in the right frame of mind come Monday, right? It's a good practice. I think everyone should practice doing that more often. Because, we live in this world of the 24-hour news cycle where information flowing never stops flowing 24/7. There's always something happening in the world, and there's just so many things that it would take you nonstop to cover it all. Now, bid you some days are less busy than others, but nonetheless, still a lot that goes on every day. It's just a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to deal with, people. But rest assured, that's what I'm here for. I go in and I deal with things that a lot of people don't like talking about, the uncomfortable things. They don't like talking about politics. They don't like talking about religion. They don't even like talking about their economy. And they sure enough don't like talking about the paranormal and supernatural. But up in here, we deal with facts and we deal with truth. That's just how we roll. It's what we do. All right. We don't sugarcoat nothing. We don't beat around the bush. We don't dodge. We don't avoid. We go ahead in. And that's what we do. We take a journalistic approach to things. All right. And we go where the evidence takes us. Regardless of where that leads us, we go where the evidence takes us. And that is the best way to approach things. That is the best approach. You try to have as clean as a white lab coat as you can get as possible before you dive in. You try to put biases and things aside as much as possible while still staying true to your individual worldview. But nonetheless, you still have to go where the evidence leads you. And I must say, we're witnessing some pretty spectacular things in these times, in this day and age. If I wasn't here to see it, I would have a hard time believing it. I would say you guys are bugging. That right there is not happening. It's not happening. Stop lying. Right? Because that's kind of like what you're left with. You're like, man, that's too spectacular. I don't believe that. Like the old saying, spectacular claims require spectacular evidence. And we're seeing some pretty spectacular things. But before we get into that, let's do what we normally do, and let's get into the overnight news. I think that is always the best place to start. But before we do that, you know what it is. We like to go in here and we like to deal with the overnight charts. Overnight charts are important because it lets you know where the markets have been and where they're possibly going. All right, so as you can see here, we got the Dow up 154 points at 25,682. NASDAQ 100 is up 78.25 points at 10,001.5. We got the E-mini S&P 500 up 20.75 points at 30.80 1/4. We got the Russell My Hustle up 5 points at 1406.8. We got Bitcoin Futures Composite Index up $180 at 95.20. Nat Gas up a penny at $1.68. Crude oil down 10 cents at $39.72 a barrel. The long bond is up 17 pips. I'm sorry, I said pips. 17/32 at 177.26. That's 177 and 26/32. Gold futures are up big this morning, up $16.90 at, I'm sorry, make that $17 even, trading at $1,770.20. Silver is now up 20 cents at $18.05. The US dollar index is down 31 pips at 97.31, and the euro dollar is up 40 pips at 112.47. Pound sterling up 59 pips at 124.20. Aussie is up 38 pips at 68.88. Canadian dollar down 39 pips at 135.63. Euro yen up 54 pips at 120.02. Dollar yen up 2 at 106.89. And the Kiwi right now is up 67 at 64.75. Soybeans down 1.5 at 8.75 even. Corn down 2 even at 3.30 half. And wheat down 2 at 4.79 1/4. So it's very interesting that wheat's getting a little bit deeper and deeper in the red. First and foremost, good morning, everybody in the live chat. What's up, Sling, CO, Wiz, 2020, Kyle, John, what up? Smash that like button. You know what it is. All right, so let's see what's on the docket. Sometimes you just don't know, so you got to check it out. Let's see what we got. Anything good on today's docket? All right, let me pull that up. Let's see. All right, so first and foremost, hold on, give me one. I need to double check something. Give me one quick second. I think some of this stuff may be overlapping, so let me just double check. See if I'm right. Nope, I'm not. Okay, great. All right, first and foremost, Wirecard stock plummets 37% after the payments firm says $2 billion in missing cash likely doesn't exist. The German fintech group's CEO resigned on Friday. Wow. A terrible, gut-wrenching scenario. Famed investor Wolf Richter says he's shorting stocks because they're more overpriced than before the dot-com crash. Richter is shorting the S&P 500 ETF because he's wary of the day trading boom and the record stock market rally given the weak U.S. economy. Stock futures cling to hopes of recovery as virus cases rise. U.S. futures rose on Monday on hopes of stimulus-fueled economic recovery, even though sentiment remained fragile amid growing evidence of a surge in coronavirus infections. All right, NACOA to cut 1,233 jobs at French subsidiary Alcatel-Lucent. Finland's Nokia OYJ plans to lay off about a third of the local workforce, two union officials said on Monday. Pandemic propels old school bond traders towards an electronic future. The mammoth bond market has long been the old school bastion of the financial world, but the COVID-19 pandemic has cast a light on its future, and it looks primarily electronic. Yeah, they're one of the last holdouts of pit traders. So, yeah, I mean, it's long overdue that they go electronic. All the other floor markets have become electronic. So it's interesting that they held out this long. All right. Global dollar crunch appears over as central banks rely on less Fed backstop. A global crunch for US dollars that was a hallmark of the early moments of the coronavirus crisis appears to have passed. The latest milestone in a remarkable turnaround in financial conditions engineered by the Federal Reserve and other top central banks. So now they're saying financial conditions engineered. So um, they're taking the applaud for this, saying this is a good thing. But if anything bad would have happened, they would have just blamed it on the virus. So I think that's very interesting. So if this report is incorrect in a few weeks, we'll see them switching to the virus, the virus, the virus. You'll just hear that parroted all over the media, virus, virus. But right now, the Fed is patting itself on the back, saying these are financial conditions that we engineered. So they're admitting that they've been engineering the economy, right? So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, yes, we did this, we engineered the economy, and then when everything goes belly up, say we didn't do anything, we didn't know what to do. Can't do that. Can't have it both ways. So they're already out here now. They already put it out in the universe. You can't take back the words that you spoke. You said it. They're saying these are financial conditions that they engineered. All right. Remember, they said that. Google billionaire Sergey Brin has a secret charity that sends ex-military staff into disaster zones on a super yacht. The Google co-founder and world's 8th richest person has a secret disaster response team, according to a report by the Daily Beast. Most stocks are down. Stocks are down in Europe and Asia, but U.S. futures are up 0.8% to 1%, signaling a positive open. Yeah, but everybody knows it doesn't matter where you open, it matters where you close. Some earnings are trickling out. I think I'm pronouncing this right. Fuway Films Holdings and PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia Persero are on the list. Economic data is out. The Bank of Canada's governor, Tiff Macklem, is due to give a speech. All right, so that's your overnight stuff. That's what happened in the overnight market. All right. Do y'all remember what I said on Thursday? I warned Thursday and Friday. I said because of the quad witch situation, when it comes to options expiring, I said, the market likes to hurt as many people as possible. There were net long positions in the S&P 500 and the SPX, which is the big boys index options market. And good and well, everybody was betting on that 3,100. Well, I'm here to tell you, as we sit here right now, the SPX is below that mark. The cash SPX closed at 30.97. So that's out of the money, which means people who bought those calls, the 3,100 calls, lost all their money. You want to see something interesting? Check this out. See if I can get this on the screen and come up correctly. I found this to be quite telling. So we're gonna check this out. All right, I want y'all to excuse me, take a look at some things. All right. Okay. This says, did someone just get carried out in S&P futures? I think so. Look at this. In a mirror image move on May's WTI collapse, right? Remember when the crude oil went negative 100? S&P futures had a WTF moment this morning as the June contract expired. Speaking about Friday. In the final 5 seconds of trading, ahead of the expiry of the June futures contract, the S&P exploded over 30 points higher from around 3160 to close at 3196 on notable volume. Look at that humongous spike. All right. As we suspect, some options market makers algo went wild on the last ditch effort to minimize pin pain. This was absolutely not evident in any other contracts. No other E-mini contracts, whether we're talking about September or December, had this spike in volume like that. This was absolutely not evident in any other contracts. Look at this. This massively decoupled from the June contract. And since June's expiration, September futures have done nothing but fade. Correct. But yeah, the markets are efficient. Yeah, look at that, man. Come on. Look at that. Look at that. Nah. This is what I'm talking about. We know what kind of markets we're dealing with, but we still have to trade these markets and do what we got to do. That's why speculation has to be managed. All right. Look at this, man. Come on. The last 5 seconds, really? So this right here is funny. This is real funny. So basically, anybody that was trading the E-mini futures, they got a blessing. But anybody trading the SPX, oh well. SPX took your head off. So people tried to make it up in the E-mini futures. I found that to be quite telling. I just had to show y'all that. That was crazy. You have to admit that was mad crazy. That was mad crazy. All right. So as you see, sometimes markets can do things to you, and you just have to be mindful of that. All right, something else interesting. You know, these crackpots are always out trying to dig up something. You got to find something to talk about, especially when there's nothing, you know, for them to talk about. So peep this one. As if 2020 wasn't bad enough, now we have crackpot scientists spinning doomsday-themed hoaxes, superstitions, and tall tales. According to them, the end of the world was supposed to be this past weekend, Father's Day weekend. All right. This is hilarious. Peep it though. 2020 has really been one heck of a year. Not only have we seen a global pandemic that's showing little signs of losing steam, but we've also seen social unrest funded by George Soros. So basically, we've seen nothing but activism, radicalized activism, and really they're a little more than a terrorist group. Okay, so as people's livelihoods are vanishing into thin air, and we have to deal with a tanking economy and plagues of locusts and volcanic eruptions and hurricanes and massive hailstones, all of which have been in the news this year. If you think we might be heading fast forward toward Armageddon, who can blame you? But according to some conspiracy theorists on Twitter, the Mayan prophecy about a cataclysmic end of the world that supposedly would bring the world to a crashing halt on December the 21st of 2012 was actually misinterpreted. The calendar theorizers suggest that the Mayan doomsday will supposedly happen this week or next. In a series of tweets last week that has since been deleted, scientist Paolo Tanguin, and he wrote, quote, following the Julian calendar, we are technically in 2012. The number of days lost in a year due to the shift into the Gregorian calendar is 11 days. For 268 years using the Gregorian calendar, and they put it 1752 minus 2020 times 11 days equals 2,948 days. 2,948 days divided by 365 days a year is 8 years. All right, that's the opening bell for those that need to handle some business, put some orders in. All right, now this is hilarious. This is really hilarious. What this means is that if we add up the missing days, then the supposed Mayan apocalypse would occur on June 21st, 2020, and that already happened. Incidentally, June 21st will also be when Africa, the Middle East, and Asia will be treated to a rare ring of fire solar eclipses that will arrive just after the summer solstice. In 2012, some conspiracy theorists claimed that December 21st was when the world would end. However, the claim was entirely false and derived from a misinterpretation of the Mayan calendar. Debunking this claim, NASA said, the story started with claims that Nibiru, a supposed planet discovered by the Sumerians, is headed toward the Earth. This catastrophe was initially predicted on May 2003, but when nothing happened, the Doomsday date was moved forward to December 2012 and linked to the end of the cycles in the ancient Mayan calendar at the winter solstice 2012. Hence, the predicted Doomsday date was December 21st of 2012. All right. The space agency also explained previously, for any claims of disaster or dramatic changes in 2012, where's the science? Where's the evidence that there is none? For all the fictional assertions, whether they are made in books, movies, documentaries, or over the internet, we cannot change the simple fact. There's no credible evidence for any of the assertions made in support of unusual events taking place in December 2012. Of course, humans have been fond of cobbling together various doomsday-themed hoaxes, superstitions, and tall tales, whether they're derived from the old French astrologer and physician Nostradamus, or the eschatology and monotheistic faiths like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. As author and literary critic Frank Kermode has suggested in his book, The Sense of an Ending, people crave such doomsday tales because they perform a basic and quite comforting psychological feature. We humans love a good story, and any good story requires an essential narrative order comprised of a beginning, middle, and end. This applies as much to our lives as it does the world around us. Kermode also suggests that the idea of a literal end in history and envision in apocalyptic tales has served as an attempt to give narrative coherence and a sense of meaning to the question of human existence. But as the ecological disasters, geopolitical conflicts, and pandemics of the year have clearly shown, the idea that global catastrophe is possible isn't so much a matter of apocalypticism as it is a question of common sense, not to mention scientific consensus. All right, so let's break this down a little bit, because some people at first glance may say this is a ridiculous article. It doesn't mean anything. It's stupid. Nothing to see here. Move on. I beg to differ. Remember, it's not always how something starts, ladies and gentlemen. It's how you end. Why do you think on Thursday on Thursday night at the end of their report, I give you the intraday price inflection points that have to be reached in all the markets in order for trend to continue or for there to be short-term tops and short-term bottoms? I give you those numbers in advance for a reason, because it doesn't matter how the market starts the week off. Everything depends and determines and is predicated on how the markets end a week, not how they start one. All right. So that's why I give you all that information, because it is paramount. All right. So let's deal with this right here. We need to deal with stuff. And that's what I'm about on this program. I like dealing with things. I don't like to let things just go and we do nothing about it. We need to really, 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 really do something about it. Okay, so let's go in. But before we do that, I need to do something right quick. Just give me a quick second, and then we'll go in. But some things need to happen real quick, so just bear with me. Yep. Give me a second. Give me a second. All right. Let's see here. All right. Yep. Let's take a look at something real quick. Y'all know how I do. All right. We are at. All right. I think it's 6. Okay, 97. Okay, 97.6. Give me a second. All right. Ooh. Wait a minute. Just one more moment. Oh boy. Too bad I don't have whatchamacallit. All right, let's see here. Sometimes when you are trying to do two things at once, you can make a mistake. All right. There we go. Okay. We're going to deal with a few things this morning. All right. Got that in there. Okay. All right. So back to this calendar. All right. So when the Mayan calendar issue first came up, we dealt with this back in 2012. I do recall there's a lot of back and forth, especially on social media about it. And a lot of people were like, it's a crack or nothing. It doesn't mean end of the world, means the end of the old paradigm and the beginning of a new one. Now, not for nothing, there were, a lot of good points people made, debating the issue back and forth. The consensus was not that it was the end of the world. I don't know why the media ran with that one. The consensus was that it was the end of the old and the beginning of the new. And at the end of the day, after all the dust settled, the consensus was it's not the end of the world, but it's the beginning of the end of the world. Meaning that we're going into the last phase of the world. We're going into the last phase of the world as you know it. And it's coming to a climactic end. It marked the beginning. So as you've noticed, there's been a steady exponential growth in natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes. It's just been an uptick in a lot of planetary disturbances, all right, perturbations, if you will, because we're getting closer and closer. If you take a look at the second law of thermodynamics, where everything goes from order to disorder, everything breaks down. The earth is no different. Things are breaking down. It has nothing to do with mankind on the earth. This is something that is just what it is. Second law of thermodynamics. Everything is breaking down. Okay? You can't avoid it. It is what it is. And man is trying to save his own existence. That's why they're coming up with the Green New Deal and all these other ridiculous laws and stuff like that, because they're trying to maintain man is trying to maintain his existence. All right, so I will say this, and this is not necessarily proof, but it is evidence. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I thought 2005 was the worst year of my life, but I was wrong. Worst year of my life was 2012. 2012 was a horrific year in multiple reasons. And I'm just talking about my own personal life. It was horrific. I lost family and friends that year. My health, my wife's health took a big hit. It was just a hellish year on a multiple levels. I couldn't wait for that year to be over with. So, two worst years of my life, 2012 and 2005. Hands down, two worst years ever on record for me. Can't speak to nobody else. I can just say those 2 years were absolute calamity. All right. I noticed that people like to pick dates on things, specific dates that something's going to happen. As human beings, we're finite. We don't have the omniscience to know all things, past, present, and future. That's not given to us. What we can do is we can map certain things. You can't eliminate risk, but you can manage risk. And I think that's where the problem comes in. People like to pick dates for this and dates for that, and it's just not possible. You can somewhat say, okay, I know a particular event is going to come, but to say the actual date that it's going to happen, that's almost impossible. Seriously, that's why I always tell you not to try to do that. Dates are almost price and time is impossible. You can predict price, but you cannot predict time. That's impossible. So that being said, I like how the article ended. The article, the way it ended, spoke volumes. It spoke volumes. It just told you what I just said. It says we have now reached a scientific consensus that we are headed toward apocalypse. We're headed toward the end of life on Earth as you know it. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the end is nigh. Winter is coming. All right. So with that being said, you can't take issue with it. Scientists already know what time it is. That's why they're scrambling. They're scrambling. Speaking about the end of all things, let's deal with this. This is a really good one. Beijing sounds the alarm about the dollar's reserve status. With all the money printing and borrowing, is this the beginning of a long decline for the dollar? I'll stop you right there and say the dollar has been in decline for decades. Clearly, this is on the minds of some senior Chinese officials. The chairman of the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission delivered a strong warning on the U.S. currency. He made 4 points in a speech at the Luozi Forum in Shanghai. He said, 1, the Fed is the de facto central bank of the world. Now, when I said it, people didn't believe me. Now you have a person in banking admitting it. The Fed is the central bank of the world, not the federal government, the Federal Reserve, the United States Federal Reserve. When its policy targets its own economy without considering the spillover effect, the Fed is very likely to overdraft the credit of the dollar and the U.S. Second, the pandemic may persist for a long period of time, and countries keep throwing money at the problem with a diminished impact. It is recommended that you think twice and reserve some policy space for the future. 3, there is no free lunch. Watch out for inflation. 4, financial markets are disconnected from the real economy, and such distortions are unprecedented. It's going to be really painful when the policy withdrawal starts. Yes, in other words, when the Fed stops printing the money, when they stop issuing new lines of credit, when the bankruptcies really start flowing, when the landlords really start evicting people from their homes, when the banks start foreclosing on people and evicting them from their homes, that's when the reality will set in. But as long as everything is being prolonged and pacified, you're not going to feel it. Some people say domestic debt is not debt, but external debt is debt. For the United States, even external debt is not debt. This seems to have been the case for quite some time in the past, but can it really last for a long time in the future? What will China do? China cherishes the conventional monetary and fiscal policies very much. We will not engage in flooding the system, nor will we engage in deficit monetization and negative interest rates. It's not the first time China vented frustration against the exorbitant privilege of the dollar. After the financial crisis, then PBOC Governor Zhao Zhaoshan proposed using the SDR to replace the dollar as the main reserve currency. It went nowhere, but this time, China seems to be determined to enhance its reserve currency status by avoiding unconventional policies. It won't dislodge the dollar tomorrow, but its attractiveness is clear in the foreign flows to its bond market. So again, we got people warning that the US is just about tapped out. Yeah. Now here's another interesting one. A decade ago, Peter Turchin predicted that 2020 would be mayhem, including widespread civil unrest. He predicted this 10 years ago. Turkin teaches cultural evolution at the University of Connecticut, and in 2010 predicted in the scholarly journal Nature that America would suffer a period of major social upheaval starting around the year 2020. They had no reason to believe I wasn't crazy back in 2010, he told the Time. People did not understand that I was making scientific predictions, not prophecies. And from the current vantage point, he looks to be exactly right. 2020 started with a global pandemic and has torpedoed into further chaos with the killing of George Floyd and the ensuing riots and protests. Turchin isn't especially excited about being right. As a scientist, I feel vindicated. But on the other hand, I am an American and have to live through these hard times. Turkin has spent decades studying crisis in America and the structural defects that help create them. He said there were many signs that there would be upheaval starting in this decade, citing stretches of turmoil that occur about every 50 years. He looked at data that analyzed peaceful and nonviolent anti-government demonstrations involving at least 100 people over the 230 years preceding 2010. And to no Zero Hedge reader's surprise, he looked at declining wages, wealth inequality, and exploding national debt as social pressures that affected national stability. His model showed that the U.S. will reach a boiling point in 2020. Recall money manager and central bank critic Bill Fleckenstein commented on a recent podcast that the Fed's actions over the last several decades also helped contribute to this boiling point. Turkin says that worse conditions could be on their way as societal crises often last 5 to 15 years. He believes that the underlying roots of the unrest need to be addressed to prevent situations like those playing out in South Africa, where protests about inequality have been taking place for 26 years. Yeah, but the funny thing is that's supposed to be post-apartheid. You don't have, quote unquote, the white man to blame now. You're in power. Why are you still having these problems? People don't like dealing with that, but we deal with it on this broadcast. President Donald Trump's administration has denied that systemic racism exists in the U.S. law enforcement system, which could delay change even longer, Turkin says. As we have broke down, it's not about the racism, it is about the brotherhood, ladies and gentlemen. We dealt with that last week. With the coronavirus still worsening the well-being of the country and millions of people out of work, he now believes that unrest may escalate all the way to a civil war. Things are not as bad as they can be, Turkin concluded. Very, very interesting, I must say. Things are playing themselves out. You're looking at a nation in decline. There's definitely no debate there. And while that's happening, we still see the radical left. We still see they're still pushing their agendas. They're using every opportunity to do this. They're using the Black Lives Matter and Antifa as Trojan horses to push forward their real goals, which is global dominance. The staff at publishing house Hachette have threatened to quit unless the company cancels its association with J.K. Rowling and scraps plans to publish her new book because they argue the author is transphobic. The Daily Mail reported that staff in the children's department at Hachette announced that they were no longer prepared to work on the book over Rowling's recent assertions that biological sex is real and that there are only two genders. Really? Here's tweets from J.K. Rowling. Quote, "If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate speech. It isn't hate to speak the truth." End quote. And then she says, "The idea that women like me, who've been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences. It's is a nonsense." And then she says, "I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so." Then she goes on to say, "Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who will have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? Really?" End quote. The Mail further reported that the publishing staffers said they were opposed to her comments and wanted to show support for the trans lobby. These staff are all very woke, mainly in their 20s and early 30s, and apparently it is an issue they feel very strongly about, the report adds. According to an insider, it was a handful of staff, and they are entitled to their views. If they were being asked to edit a book on domestic abuse, and they were a survivor of domestic abuse, of course, they would never be forced to work on it. But this is a children's fairy tale. It is not the end of the world. They will all be having chats with their managers. Hachette is backing J.K. Rowling, having issued a statement saying, "We are proud to publish J.K. Rowling's children's fairy tale, The Ichabod. Freedom of speech is a cornerstone of publishing. Quote, we fundamentally believe that everyone has the right to express their own thoughts and beliefs. That's why we never comment on our author's personal views, and we respect our employees' right to hold a different view," the company added. "We will never make our employees work on a book whose content they find upsetting for personal reasons, but we draw a distinction between that and refusing to work on a book because they disagree with an author's views outside their writing. which runs contrary to our belief in free speech, the statement also noted. Now, I think we really need to break this down. So, too bad I don't have any music, but let's take a quick commercial break. Okay, and welcome back. For those of you just tuning in, you're listening to the pre-market PulseScan report with yours truly, Dex, the algo capitalist, aka the Vulcan. This is what we do on our pre-market PulseScans. All right, so let's get into this situation. So basically, what you have is this: you have the LGBTQ community using this as a reason and an excuse to push forward their agenda. Clearly, everything that she said was respectful, and she was basically paying homage to him, saying, I ride with y'all. But now they want to use this to attack. So basically, J.K. Rowling is just being used as a sacrificial lamb to push forward their agenda of controlling speech. Hate speech is when you say, I hate all blank. They should all be killed when you're using that kind of language. All right? That's hate speech. Hate speech is not debating scientific facts with people. Hate speech is not debating and or taking an opposite position or another belief. That's not hate speech. All right? And they know this. They know that that woman didn't do nothing to them. And you know what? I don't know how things are overseas, but I know here in the United States, we have a thing called at will employment. So if you don't like what your employer stands for or what have you, or you take issue for any reason, you can feel free to walk off the job. You can quit. You can hand in your 2 weeks notice and you can go find another job. All right. Since when do companies have to pander to their employees? They don't. There's someone else that is in need of a job that probably does the job better than you do. And you leaving is actually a blessing to the company. All right. Now, I can speak on this issue. I remember coming out of high school working for an organization, and it was a organization that was backed by government money. And the government decided that they were going to start paying for abortions. All right. It didn't matter what the reason was. You didn't have to have a reason. All you had to do is be a woman who says, I am pregnant and I don't want to be. And you will, this will be paid for you. All right. No questions asked. Bam. 100% paid for. No problem. There were people at the company who said, you know what? I don't agree with this. I don't like abortion. I don't agree with abortion. Abortion is wrong. Abortion is murder. Therefore, I cannot be a part of this. I will not be a part of this. And there was a debate that took place among those that had no Not with those that didn't have a problem with it, but with those that had a problem with it. And there was a lot of talk. And I remember at the end of the day, the consensus was this: it is not you who is performing the abortion, number one, and it is not you who made the decision to do that. You work for a company. You are not responsible for the actions that they are undertaking. Your job is to do your job. When bills come in, your job was to pay the bills. That's it. If you don't like your job, then you should quit and go somewhere else. I'm here to tell you, I don't recall anyone quitting on those grounds. All right? People still had to do their jobs in the morning. You didn't like it, you don't support it, but you still had to you had a job to do, and you had to do it. You weren't the one performing those procedures. All right? You weren't the one that said, this is what the government is going to do, and I'm the one that's pulling the lever on this. You had nothing to do with that. It's kind of analogous to this. Back in the day, remember when British Knights was in trouble for supposedly being the Ku Klux Klan, and the Mystic Drink was on the chopping block too, supposed to be, a Klan organization, and all these organizations and brands were, that. And then remember, anyone who gave money to apartheid or did business with any apartheid affiliated entity was being boycotted and blah, blah, blah. Well, here's the thing, you guys. When you draw things to the logical conclusion, that in and of itself is silly as well. I'll tell you why it's silly. Because when you draw things out to the logical conclusion, you'll get to the point where you won't be able to do anything. Because at the end of the day, every human being on the face of the planet is a sinner. So you say, well, I can't do business with sinners. Well, then you can't do anything. You're saying I can only do business with other Christians. So what if you live in a place where you're the only Christian? How are you going to eat? How are you going to get supplies? How are you even going to operate if you can't even step foot on the land that is foul? See what I'm saying? You won't be able to do anything. You know what I'm saying? It's absolutely absurdity. Well, I can't eat. I can't shop at this grocery store because I heard that the owner of the grocery store is gay. Well, no, I can't do business at this bank because I heard that the bank manager eats children. Nope, I can't live in that state because I hear that state was founded on the backs of slaves. Nope, nope. You know what? I can't drink water that comes from any water company, regardless of where they're located, because I hear a scientific fact and evidence that it shows that slave masters drank from the same pool, and I can't do it. Matter of fact, I can't live above ground. I have to live underground in an underground cave because when it rains, those water vapor droplets used to be inhaled and drank by slave owners and by lizard people. So I have to stay under the ground. I can't come out from the cave. Oh, you know what? Because of my beliefs, I can't even share the same land with anyone who has an opposing idea of opinion in what I do. So I have to now leave the earth and just float in space for a while because I can't share the same space with these people. You see how absurd this goes? You see how this goes? All right. When you bring things out to the logical conclusion, it really helps you to see the absurdity of it and to get past it. And this is where we are. All right. They want to control speech. They want to control everything you do. Now, these are the same people that claim that they've been oppressed for generations, but now they want to oppress you. They don't just want to be free. No, they want to oppress you back. They want to be the aggressor and the oppressor. Why you think they've come up with all these different things, hate speech and this and that? Well, you can't even talk. They control you. You can't even talk. You can never debate or say anything because then that's hate speech, and then you can be arrested with a mandatory 5 to 10 year sentence just for opening your mouth to dare to discuss or debate someone on a topic. If anyone feels some type of way about the topic, doesn't matter. You're guilty of a hate crime and hate speech. I believe that blue M&Ms should be excluded from the package because they're not the original flavor and color. Hate speech because I believe that what you just said was hateful because my father is blue. That's right, my father is blue. What are you talking about? Yes, here's a picture of me and my daddy. My daddy turned blue because he ingested too much colloidal silver. Now he's blue and he looks like a Smurf. So you offended me. What you said about blue M&Ms is hate speech because my daddy is blue. So now they call the police come and they arrest you for hate speech. How dare you say that blue M&Ms don't belong in the bag? Don't you know this woman's daddy is blue? You're under arrest. See how ridiculous we go? Do you see how far this thing can go when you take it to its logical conclusion? Well, you can't even debate and talk or conversate. We're getting to the point where it's like this. It's becoming illegal to speak to each other. It's becoming illegal to touch one another for various reasons. A, you violated my personal space when you tried to shake my hand. B, you got the coronavirus going on. You're trying to infect me. C, Me Too movement. If it's a man talking to a female or extends his hand out, oh, he's trying to molest me. He's trying to take control from my body away from me. I feel violated. I'm calling the police. This man assaulted me. This man sexually assaulted me. He raped me. And now that man is up the river. His life is ruined. His finances are ruined. His career is ruined. Everything is ruined. You see where we are? This is where we already are. This is not where we're going, folks. We're already here. You can't talk to each other and you can't touch one another in any kind of way, shape, or form. You understand what I'm saying? This is where we are, folks. We have allowed these left-wing radical groups to not only redefine our society, but we've given them absolute control over it. This is where we are, not where we're headed. We're already here. You got to talk to each other through plexiglass already. Plexiglass. This is something that did not exist a year ago, ladies and gentlemen. Now we talk to each other through plexiglass. We can't really have a conversation with verbal intercourse. We have to do it through texting. We have to text or use Twitter or Facebook timelines. You can't really communicate in person anymore. It's not allowed. You can be arrested. See what I'm saying? This is how far society has fallen. Again, J.K. Rowling specifically expressed how she feels, and she says, I'm riding with y'all. I'm LGBTQ all the way. However, on this one issue, we do need to have a conversation. All right, there's only two genders. Now, we talked about this last week on the show. All right. They're playing on words to try to trip people up. This is the Vulcan mind meld. This is the Jedi mind trick. We don't mean two physical genders. We mean mentally. Remember, we talked about that last week. All right. We talked about mental illness and stuff like that last week. And you don't get to have it both ways, because if you open that Pandora's box, you open that door, then you have to let everybody else in. There's no favoritism given here. You have to have equal rights under the law. All right? Everyone is entitled to their opinions and beliefs. Beliefs and opinions are not illegal. Actions are illegal, not opinions. Words should never be illegal, ladies and gentlemen. Words are words. All right? Everyone should have the right to free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of thought. You don't have to like it or agree with it, but it should be allowed. As adults, you don't need another adult telling you what to say, think, or how to feel. You can debate, you can discuss these things openly and vigorously. And then at the end of the day, when it's all over, go out and have a hamburger together. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how grown-ups talk. It's called grown people talk. We get to talk about hard things, heavy things. But then afterwards, I mean, we slap down about it. We have a brawling debate over it. But then at the end, what do? We laugh about it. We go out and have a beer together. That's how adults are supposed to communicate, not like children. Well, I don't like you because you have a big head. Ha ha ha. When you start name calling and attacking the messenger because you can't take issue with the message, that's childish. Okay? It is what it is. It's really sad, but this is what we've gotten, folks. Which leads us to the next thing. We really need to tear down the plexiglass, ladies and gentlemen. They put plexiglass between us, and no one is saying anything. All right? Now, this is from the American Institute for Economic Research. On Monday, June the 16th, they say that the writer says, I was finally given government permission to return to the gymnasium that I had been affiliated with for over 2 decades. It actually is a satellite branch built in a large warehouse separate from the main facility. This smaller, grittier gym has more free weights to lift, tires to flip, and heavy bags to punch. I go for the boxing. I also go for the people. The desk staff knows me pretty well, so much so that I get a special set of towels. They like that I usually come in with some quirky remark that generates a chuckle or two. Every time I enter, my goal is to get them to laugh. There's always some chit-chat. Each day I find out a little bit more about the staff, and they discover a little bit more about me. Where they went out the night before, what muscles are aching me today. But now there is plexiglass. When I arrived on Monday, the first time back in at least 14 weeks, I had to first go to a check-in tent just outside the building's doors. There, I had to sign a waiver about coronavirus, answer a set of questions about any symptoms I might have, and then get my temperature taken remotely by a gentleman with a mask and one of those thermal scanners. Once I passed that gauntlet, I could walk through the doors that were propped open so I didn't have to touch the handle. Oh my goodness. You can already see where this is going. In the lobby, I was shocked to see that the main desk now had giant sheets of plexiglass in front of the 2 stations where the staff usually stands and hands out towels. It looked odd. Given the current phase 1.5 Washington State virus protocols, we are not allowed to get towels from the gym, let alone even shower there. We must bring in our own small sweat rags. No worries, I thought, because I wasn't sure how they would hand them to me around the foreboding plexiglass barrier. After finishing my workout and walking past the shuttered shower stalls, I stopped by the desk again to chat with Danny and to buy a box of protein snacks. As I hadn't used my account in over 3 months, my credit card on file had expired and I needed to update it. This procedure included me putting the card on the desk and sliding it around the plexiglass so that Danny could see the numbers but not touch the card. Once he finished entering my data, I slid the card back, put it in my pocket, and squirted hand sanitizer over my palms and fingers. And that plexiglass, everything felt different because of the plexiglass. Back in the days of the Old West, banks would have steel bars separating them from their customers. This was done to make it more difficult to jump the counter and rob the bank. In a world of transient individuals and many strangers passing through, you never knew who to trust, especially if there was a large amount of cash on hand. In crime-ridden areas today, metal bars and thick plexiglass separate customers from staff in pawn shops, check cashing facilities, liquor stores, all places that are targets for robbery, places where trust between individuals is unfortunately low. Cigarettes and razor blades are locked in plexiglass cases and can only be obtained upon special requests. The store owners cannot trust that somebody won't steal these items. Such lack of trust is not good for the economy. In narrowly economic terms, it raises transaction costs and creates deadweight loss. The store has to invest in more security. The employees have to take the time to unlock the case to get the shaving razors. This is time the employees could be using stocking shelves or helping other customers find some new product. But metal bars and plexiglass cases also breed distrust and damage our willingness to exchange and interact with one another. As Adam Smith famously said, the wealth of nations is determined by the extent of the market. Larger markets involve more anonymous and quasi-anonymous trade. Without some basic level of trust in society, these transactions don't happen and we become poorer for it. Again, the breaking down of communication, as I just stated a moment ago, the breakdown of society continues, this time with the breaking down of how we communicate with one another. All right? Poverty not only facilitates crime, crime creates poverty. It is a vicious cycle. And we try to limit the cycle with plexiglass. It is tragically unfortunate that impoverished neighborhoods are caught in this trap. Our policy efforts need to be directed more towards building trust in these areas and less on installing thicker plexiglass. The social unrest in our streets has much to do with mistrust that is rife with these communities. Mistrust that occurs between police and citizens, but also between all members of these communities. I have to say, in the inner cities, plexiglass has been a staple of the community just as much as the projects have in the community. You can't go into a liquor store or any store for that matter without plexiglass. Some of the convenience stores is very small. The entire store is behind plexiglass. There's just a narrow walkway. When you open the door, there's a narrow walkway. And there's a wall with plexiglass as thick as your arm. And you got a person on the other side and the entire store behind them. So the entire store has been put behind plexiglass. If you want something, the guy has to physically leave you at the plexiglass and go to the store to get and grab what you want and then bring it up to the front, bring it up for you to pay for it. Now, some of you don't know what I'm talking about, but if you've ever been in the hood, you know what I'm talking about, especially in poor areas. All right, where the entire store is behind plexiglass. I kid you not. I've seen electronic stores like that. I've seen convenience stores like that, specialty shops like that. Everything is behind plexiglass. Everything. And now plexiglass is everywhere. It's now mushroomed outside of the inner city. Now it's in suburban grocery stores, small town restaurants, gymnasiums. It's great for plexiglass manufacturers, but bad for society. I am mandated to separate myself from the cashier, bartender, desk clerk, because I might transfer germs to them and they might do the same to me. We cannot trust that we won't infect one another. It is not that I think that the other person is intentionally trying to infect me the way a thief intentionally tries to pilfer cigarettes, but there is mistrust in the air nonetheless, a palpable concern that any interaction might lead to a horrible illness or death. That's the conditioning. Touch this person and you'll die. Get too close to this person and you'll die. That's the message that's being sent, ladies and gentlemen. And it's ridiculous. I worry that this new age of plexiglass will discourage human interaction and exchange, the lifeblood of a wealthy society. I worry that it is a symbol of increasing mistrust that may be promoting. I like to talk to Danny at the gym, but our plexiglass separated interaction just feels different, more distant, less trusting. And it was uncomfortable having my temperature taken by a person behind a mask. I would have normally talked to him, but his face and identity hidden from my sight. As Jeffrey Tucker had noted, these masks have become an indication of a fearful society. Human flourishing cannot occur amongst a fearful population. At the beginning of this essay I wrote, they put up plexiglass between us, but who are the they? Obviously, it was the businesses that installed the barriers, but business owners were largely acting upon governmental dictates, not suggestions, dictates. What do dictators do? They dictate. If you want government permission to reopen your business, that's right, you need government permission to reopen your business. You have to put up the plexiglass. That's right. Dig in your pocket and pay for expensive plexiglass. Nonetheless, some store managers may have done so of their own accord as a way of saying, we're looking out for your safety. This is a nice sentiment, but it doesn't remove the barrier. Now, another place where we had barriers for decades now is taxis, especially those located around the inner cities. And that expense had to be put up by the taxi driver himself. The company didn't do that. They didn't pay for it. Now, some companies offer to front the money like a draw, but it'll be a draw against, additional, future income. And back then, I'm talking back in the day, to put the sophisticated plexiglass barrier with the slide tray and all that thing for the taxi drivers, to install it was $700. All right, $700. That's a week's worth of driving for the average taxi driver, especially back then. You were lucky if after you paid for your taxi expenses to the company that you netted $700 a week. So that's a big hit to have to take. But a lot of cabs couldn't afford it, and unfortunately, the ones that were getting murdered and the ones that were being robbed, they didn't have the plexiglass because they couldn't afford it. So those that could afford it didn't have those problems, but those that couldn't end up becoming statistics on the news. All right. And it's really sad, but that's where we are. Okay. This is where we are. If you want government permission to reopen your business today, you got to put up the plexiglass. All right. You got to. The they who made us install the plexiglass are also the fear merchants of our viral times. They are the ones who urge us to stay home. They are not just the CDC employees or other government officials. They are the howling media who thrive off fear and panic. They are our neighbors who glare at us for coming too close to one another or not wearing a mask. They are also us, you and me, for letting ourselves be talked into a sterile fear. I hope this fear is temporary. I pray that masks are not the new normal. I implore our leaders to understand that the lack of trust in society is what prevents poor neighborhoods and cities from flourishing. Work to banish mistrust, not spread it further. To paraphrase Ronald Reagan, who challenged Mikhail Gorbachev to eradicate another major symbol of fear and mistrust in the world, I urge us to tear down this plexiglass. I have to admit, it's a bad look. It sends a bad message to a society that is already broken down. All right. This society is already on the ropes. Okay. And then when you put up the plexiglass barriers and you put all these other extremes, it really just makes things worse as far as what's going on. It really does. Now, speaking of which, we do need to address some other stuff too, because I've been around. I've been looking at some stuff. I've been looking, and I have to say, I don't see any difference. So let's peep this right here. Lately on the news, you guys, I know you've been hearing how they've been saying there's been a spike in coronavirus cases here, there, and just about everywhere, right? And this is after the countries are opening back up. But let's dive a little bit deeper into this. What spike? Hospitalization data shows no indication of a second wave. None. Are we on the verge of a second wave of coronavirus infection? Is there a spike in infections in states that reopened first? The only way to answer that question is to watch as the data rolls in. Arguably, the best data to look at to see if a second wave is beginning are the hospitalization numbers. The media frequently reports the biggest and most dramatic numbers, often devoid of context. The number of cases has been reported regularly since the early days of the pandemic, and yet we know the number of cases can be misleading. Think about it. We talked about this too last week. Isn't it ironic? Isn't it ironic that all of this stuff, really came to be during flu season? Okay? They waited until flu season because really most of the deaths that are occurring are from the common flu, not coronavirus. But they're listing pretty much every morbidity issue as coronavirus so they can spook you with those numbers so they can justify more draconian measures. All right? That's what they're saying. All right? Let's peep it. Okay. As more people are tested and retested for the virus, more results will come back positive, with the current number of confirmed cases exceeding 2 million in the US. But if we know anything, it is that increases in the number of confirmed cases do not accurately convey how quickly and widely the virus is spreading. Antibody tests and even the examination of sewage in some cities suggests that the number of infections is likely much higher than the number of confirmed cases. But on the other side, some of the confirmed cases are double counted. In some states, partly because both antibody and active virus tests are being counted separately, but then combined in the total number of cases. See how they practice that fraud in them? While the antibody tests have been criticized for their false positive rate, another criticism has been that antibody studies can underreport infection rates because they are not sensitive enough to detect a past mild infection. Overall, because the bulk of testing is focused on people who are the sickest and who face the greatest exposure, it seems reasonable to conclude that the true number of U.S. infections is substantially higher than the reported figure. But an attempt to estimate the true number of infections will be little better than a guess. At this present, a problem with the daily updates to say that a particular state or city is seeing a spike in cases is to say that recently they have had an uptick in positive test results. That could be due to more testing and more ways of testing, or it could be a hint of growth in the infection rate itself. Better data are available. Rather than focus on test results, i.e., cases, it would make more sense to focus on how the virus affects society and our institutions, particularly the strain the virus puts on healthcare facilities and healthcare providers. An obvious measure tracked since the beginning of the pandemic is the number of deaths. As I and others at AIER have noted, the number of deaths is hard to interpret without important context. The coronavirus is obviously deadly, but how deadly is it seems to depend greatly on how it enters a population and the characteristics of that population. The virus has been far deadlier in New York than it has been in California, and has been most deadly in the U.S. longer-term care facilities. Among children, the coronavirus is considerably less deadly than seasonal influenza. Nonetheless, deaths tell us something important about the virus's impact on society. They profoundly affect entire social networks and are rightly emphasized in pandemic reporting. When it comes to seeing how things are going now, whether the pandemic is growing worse or fading, deaths are a lagging indicator. They do not begin to spike until infections have already been accelerating rapidly for many days, and they do not decline until well after the virus spreads has slowed. So these are facts that have to be taken into consideration. In addition to deaths, more attention has shifted to measuring coronavirus-related hospitalizations. Frustratingly, these data tend not to go back as far as numbers on confirmed cases or deaths, but in most states, there are hospitalization figures going back over 2 months. The hospital data are measured two ways, the first being a cumulative measure, similar to the way confirmed cases and deaths are measured. The number can only go up as more hospitalizations are added to the total. From that number, the daily number of hospitalizations can be plotted. However, that number is very noisy because the numbers are submitted at the state level in a variety of ways and do not seem to reflect the true numbers per day. In other words, it's not real time, it's delayed data. In other words, the hospitalization numbers seem to come in clumps. They can be reported as weekly totals or weekly averages as well. But a weakness of the cumulative data is that they do not tell us much about the burden on hospitals and healthcare workers. The total number of coronavirus hospitalizations increased dramatically from 0 to nearly 60,000 in a month nationally. Again, that's nationally. And stayed high for weeks afterwards. Okay. The northeastern U.S. was hit hardest, but most states are either seeing declining or flat trends in hospitalizations, with few new notable exceptions, such as North Carolina, Texas, and Arizona. But in those states, the number of hospitalizations is still relatively low, a fraction of the totals that New York and New Jersey were seeing in April. Claims that Alabama, Georgia, and Florida are emerging hotspots are not supported by hospitalization numbers, despite media reports to the contrary. So the media knows those numbers are out there, but they have to say and talk the talking points that are provided to them by the federal government. There's no longer investigative journalism in the mainstream media. It's just parrot what the government has provided for you. There are some parts of the country still in the midst of the first wave of coronavirus infections. States that had very, very low numbers of hospitalizations and deaths in April, but are now beginning to see virus spread more quickly. But those states are unlikely to see the kind of spread northeastern states did, and there is hope the virus can be far less deadly going forward if policies can be implemented to better protect the elderly and vulnerable, especially those living in long-term care facilities. Again, what spike? I've been to the hospital a couple times in the last couple of weeks, and I have to tell you, The thing is still primarily empty. It's mad empty. There is no one home. Even the waiting rooms are nowhere near their normal crowded condition. So what's going on? What's really going on? Okay. We have to ask those questions. You know, we really do. I think what's really happening is that, like I said, we have a lot of problems going on in the United States. A lot of it. And it's not really being addressed. And I'm sorry, I don't see a way out right now. I don't see a turning point, people. I don't see it. The dumbing down of society right now is really starting to really rear its ugly head in how we go about dealing with certain topics and issues. This is very telling because we handle it at the elementary school level, not like, rational thinking adults. Yeah, I see you in the live, CEO. I heard about the DL Hughley passing out on that, and of course they're gonna say he had COVID. But remember, he's not alone in that. Your girl passed out on TV. Remember Wendy Williams? All right. Because we're not there and we don't know their personal lives, I can only tell you what has come out over the last, several years, and that's that a lot of celebrities be doing these extreme diets and stuff where they dehydrate their bodies extremely. And as a person who has passed out on numerous occasions because of dehydration, I can tell you that that is a real thing. If you are dehydrated, you can and will pass out. You will lose consciousness. Sorry. So I'm gonna err on that side and say I think his dehydration situation is what did it. He was dehydrated. I'm just gonna go there with it. To say that he had coronavirus, that's a stretch. Why does every time someone have some type of an illness, because the times when they want to say coronavirus? All right. Now I got to take the other extreme because again we deal with everything here. We deal with both sides, the far left, the far right, the middle, all of it. You can also make an argument that that was probably not the real DL Hughley and could have been a robotoid or an automatron. So we got to go there too. Could have been a clone. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. Could have been a robotoid. Could have been an automatron. Could have been a clone. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about and think that that's wacky and kooky conspiracy theory, you need to think again and do a little bit of homework. There is some truth to those things. Those of you who have been with me for a long time, I first covered that back a long time ago, years ago on my channel. There was a scientific type of a convention they were having in Florida back in the early 90s, and they actually displayed a robotoid automatron type of a thing. They thought they were talking to a real person, watching a real person interact. Until the people came out and said, "Okay, we fooled all of you. He is not a real person. This is a robotoid automatron. And yes, it looked, spoke, and moved just like a regular person. You could not tell the difference." So yes, that technology has been out for a long time. All right, androids are real. Don't let them trick you into thinking that they look all crazy. That's not true. They have some that you would not be able to tell the difference. It's just what it is. Not to mention, body doubles is a real thing too. Body doubles go back centuries, people, even millennia. All right. Anyone who is anyone has a body double, especially, leaders of state like kings, queens, presidents, prime ministers, even emirs, you name it. Anyone who is in a position of authority and power and extreme wealth, you better believe they have a body double. Pretty much every president of the United States that ever existed had a body double, at least one or two. All right. So If you don't believe me, go ahead and fact check me. Do some digging, do some research, but just be prepared for what you find. All right, you may not sleep well tonight. All right, so again, we don't know what it was. I'm going to go ahead and err on the side of dehydration because, in my opinion, he's been looking a little sickly. Okay, um, it just is what it is. All right, I'm gonna say dehydration. Could it have not been him? Could it have been a Robotoid or a automatron or a clone or a body double? Yeah, sure enough. All of those are possibilities because we don't know. And we weren't there. I'm just saying. All right. As far as we're concerned, it could have been a doppelganger. Or a skinwalker. No, I'm messing around. I'm being funny. But seriously, we don't know. And I hope everything's okay with him and his family. Seriously, that's not, health is not something you play with, especially once you get up in age, once you cross the middle age mark. You gotta really start thinking about things. And for those who are unaware, when I say middle age is 35. I don't know why people think it's 55 and 65. No, middle age is 35. All right. So do the knowledge to that. 3 scores. Was it 4? Yeah. Whatever the math is, I can't think right now. But in other words, when after the antediluvian period ended, man's days on average were supposed to be 70 years. So on average, man lives 70 years. If that be true, we know it is true because God put it in his word. That means middle age, then half of 70 is 35. Therefore, 35 is middle aged. That's also around the time that you start noticing differences in your body, no matter how healthy or physically fit you are. You start noticing that things start deteriorating a little bit. You may used to be able to run the 100-meter dash at a certain time. Now you're just a little bit slower. You're not giving it less effort. You're just a little bit slower. People who jog and been jogging all their life may notice that it takes them a little longer to run the same distance every day. Or they may become a little bit winded now, where they didn't used to ever become winded. All right, so the body starts really, aging and breaking down once it crosses that 35-year-old barrier. Just some stuff to put out there. But anyway, back on what we were saying. We live in weird times, okay? I'm saying I'm not going to be as cruel as the author on this next one at the American Institute of Economic Research, but I'm going to be a little bit kinder. But according to him, we have a smart society full of stupid people. We live through the most bizarre experience of human folly in my lifetime and perhaps in generations. Among the strangest aspect of this has been the near universal failure on the part of regular people and even the appointed experts, the ones the government employs in any case, to have internalized anything about the basics of viruses that my mother understands, thanks to her mother before, who had a solid education in the subject after World War II. Thus, for example, are all governments ready to impose new lockdowns? Should the infection data turn in the other direction? Under what theory, precisely, is this supposed to help matters? How does reimposing stay-home orders or mandating gym closures mysteriously manage to intimidate a virus into going away? Run away and hide seems to have replaced anything like a sophisticated understanding of viruses and immunities. Learning made easy, molecular and cell biology for dummies. Hilarious. So I decided to download Molecular and Cell Biology for Dummies just to check if I'm crazy. I'm pleased to see that it clearly states that there are only 2 ways to defeat a virus: natural immunity and vaccines. The book completely left out the option that almost the entire world embraced in March: destroy businesses, force everyone to hide in their homes, and make sure that no one gets close to anyone else. The reason that the text leaves that out is that the idea is essentially ridiculous. So much so that it was initially sold as a strategy to preserve hospital space and only later mutated into a general principle that the way to beat a virus is to avoid people and wear a mini hazmat suit. Here is the passage. For all of recorded history, humans have done a deadly dance with viruses. Measles, smallpox, polio, and influenza viruses changed the course of human history. Measles and smallpox killed hundreds of thousands of Native Americans, but you don't leave out the part that it was quote unquote the white man that gave them the smallpox blankets. Okay, don't gloss over stuff. And all right, if you're gonna tell a story, tell the whole story. Polio killed and crippled people, including U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the 1918 influenza epidemic killed more people than were killed during all of World War I. For most viruses that attack humans, your only defenses are prevention and your own immune system. Antibiotics don't kill viruses, and scientists haven't discovered many effective antiviral drugs. Vaccines are little pieces of bacteria or viruses injected into the body to give the immune system an education. They work by ramping up your own defensive system so that you're ready to fight the bacteria or virus upon first contact without becoming sick first. However, for some viral diseases, no vaccines exist, and the only option is to wait uncomfortably for your immune system to win the battle. A virus is not a miasma, a cootie, or a red goo, like in the children's book Cat in the Hat. I beg to differ. Miasma can really jam you up if you're playing Dragon's Dogma, the Dark Arisen, which is a Dungeons and Dragons themed game. If you've played that, then you would know better. Miasma is a powerful weapon that can help you ward off enemies in that game. So, see, they don't know everything. See, these scientists don't know what they're talking about. There is no path toward waging, much less winning a national war against a virus. It cares nothing about borders, executive orders, and titles. A virus is a thing to battle one immune system at a time, and our bodies have evolved to be suited to do just that. Vaccines can give advantage to the immune system through a clever hack. Even so, there will always be another virus and another battle. And so it's been for hundreds of thousands of years. If you read the above carefully, you know more than you would know from watching 50 TED Talks on viruses by Bill Gates. Now that's clever. I like that. Though having thrown hundreds of millions of dollars into cobbling together some global plan to combat microbes, his only understanding seems to not have risen above a cooties theory of run away and hide. Yeah, I remember that in elementary school. So-and-so has cooties. Oh, you have cooties. Basically, cooties was just a glorified game of tag, basically. Because automatically you say a person has cooties, and then that person has cooties. Their job, first and foremost, is to hurry up and run as fast as they can to touch someone else out. Now you got cooties. So cooties was a childhood game of tag, basically. And whoever got touched had cooties. And then, we start becoming clever and coming up with ways to immune ourselves. No, I don't have cooties because I have on a hazmat suit. I have a super hazmat suit that fell out of the sky from Mars, so I'm immune. But you're not immune. You still have it. Everybody run away from Sherry. She has it. Yeah, that's how. Did I not say that adults are acting like children when it comes to dealing with things? That's exactly what is happening right now. And it's sad, but it is the truth. There's another level of virus comprehension that came to be observed in the 1950s and then codified in the 70s. For many viruses, not everyone has to catch them to become immune, and not everyone needs a vaccine if there is one. Immunity is achieved when a certain percentage of the population has contracted some form of the virus with symptoms or without, and then the virus effectively dies. Remember, I told you that used to be a thing back in the 70s? Hey, your cousin has chicken pox. Come on, everybody. We're going over to your cousin's house. All the children who in the family that didn't have it would go to the cousin's house so they could all get exposed to the chicken pox so it could be over and done with. Some people don't know what I'm talking about, but for those of you who do, you remember those. You remember that. Yep. Chicken pox party. So-and-so has chicken pox. All right, let's go get it done with. Now, it's funny. My uncle had mumps, but I didn't get the mumps. And I was around him, but I didn't get the mumps. So that was interesting. I never developed that. But those chicken pox were a beast. Got those back when I was 12. Hated it. All right, this has important implications because it means the vulnerable demographics can isolate for the active days of the virus and return to normal life once herd immunity has been realized with infection within some portion of the non-vulnerable population. This is why every bit of medical advice for elderly people has been to avoid large crowds during the flu season, and why getting and recovering from non-vulnerable groups is a good thing. Yeah, because again, like I said, as you get older, the body is starting to break down. One of those breakdowns is the body's ability to ward off infections. All right, that's why elderly people are at risk because their immune systems are not as strong as younger people because they're aging, their body's breaking down. Second law of thermodynamics. All right. What you get from this virus advice is not fear, but calm management. This wisdom, not ignorance, but wisdom, was behind the do no harm approach to the polio epidemic of 1949 to 1952. The Asian flu of 1957 to 1958, and the Hong Kong flu of 1968 and 69. Donald Henderson summed up this old wisdom beautifully. Communities faced with epidemics or other adverse events respond best and with the least anxiety when the normal social functioning of the community is least disrupted. In other words, continue with your daily lives. Don't shut down the economies. Just take precautions. Don't be stupid. And that's what we did for the 100 years following the catastrophe of the Spanish flu of 1918. We never again attempted widespread closures or lockdown precisely because they had failed so miserably in the few places they were attempted. Now, see, again, those that do not know their history are destined to repeat it. And that's what's happening right now. We're reliving 1918 all over again. And you can pretty much call it a 100-year cycle. Remember, I talked about the 100-year cycle on this channel? Remember, we talked about that? All right, let's deal with it. Let's deal with this. Okay? The cooties theory attempted a comeback with the swine flu of 2009, the H1N1. But the world was too busy dealing with a financial crisis, so the post-war strategy of virus control and mitigation prevailed once again, thankfully. But then the perfect storm hit in 2020, and a new generation of virus mitigators got their chance to conduct a grand social experiment based on computer modeling and forecasting. Stop right there. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what I have been warning about and warning about and warning about and warning about. All right? Computer modeling and forecasting. There is no such thing as artificial intelligence. Either you have intelligence or you don't. An inanimate object can never obtain intelligence because it doesn't have a soul. It is incapable of that type of volition. The only thing it can do is be a computer. What is a computer at the end of the day? It is a glorified calculator capable of crunching numbers at lightning speed. That's all a computer is doing. It's crunching data. It cannot create new data. That would be impossible. That would be impossible. And it's it can learn. Not really. Again, what it's doing, it's taking certain information and storing that, and then cross-referencing and crunching that. It's really not technically learning. It doesn't have a soul. It can't. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. A computer can never fear God because it's not human and it doesn't have a soul. This is the problem. When you think that the computer is God, the computer is not God, can't be God. Computer modeling is full of flaws, and so is your forecasting because it's being done by humans. How did the computer get here? A human being made it. How did the forecast get here? A human being made it. Thus, it is prone to error. Do you know how much problems the United States has faced in the last 100 years? That the majority of the problems were caused by a flawed computer model and horrific forecasting? I cannot stress this enough. I don't care how sophisticated our computers get. Your models are only as good as the experience and the wisdom of the one doing the modeling, the one programming the code. Not only does the facts have to be correct, but then the code has to be correct as well to reflect the facts. If your facts are wrong, no matter how good the coding is, it's still going to come out flawed and wrong. You have to input the correct information if you want the correct computations. One digit off is catastrophe. I cannot stress this enough. Why do you think that I had to spend these last 20 years working on the PulseWave price trigger reports? That one of the hardest parts that I had to factor in was to take that very fact into consideration. What if you're wrong? What do you do when you're wrong? You're going to be wrong a lot because you're a human being prone to error. But how can we get around that? What can we do to mitigate that? What can we do to control and manage being wrong? And then that's when I discovered that there was a way in the markets to make money even when and if you are wrong. See what I'm saying? Now, if I never considered being wrong, then the PulseWave system would not be the most robust and incredible trading system in world history. I had to factor those in. I had to factor in the wrong first. What if this is wrong? What should you do? What if that's wrong? What should you do? And then I had to figure out, is there a way to even make money when you are wrong? Most people never even factor that into any of their computer modeling, regardless of of what we're talking about. It could be medicine. It could be anything. The computer model is only as good as the data that it receives. If the data is flawed, the model is flawed. And so is your forecasting. I covered that several episodes ago. Go to pulsewavetrading.com here on YouTube and you'll find it. When we talked about modeling, the pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses of computer modeling and forecasting. All right? You have to do a lot of trial and error and testing in a controlled environment before you release that thing into real time, because you have to know where the catastrophe is, especially if you want people to bow down to it and start using it. And that's why we have the problem we have right now with the whole coronavirus, because their modeling is off and so is their forecasting. That's why we're having the insane realities that we have now, for all these bankruptcies and stuff happening. They want to blame the virus. It had nothing to do with the virus. It was their response to the virus. It was what their computer model told them to do because of the virus. That's the problem. Shutting down was their decision. It had nothing to do with the virus. All right, and they can make the argument that things would have been worse if they didn't, but they have no precedent for that. All right, so you have to understand that. And this is where we are today. They don't want to admit that their model was flawed and it never been put to the test in real time. One of the aspects of modeling is back testing and forward testing. Back testing is when you take historical data, throw it into the system, and let it spit you out the results. That's back testing. You can find strengths and weaknesses within your system if you know how to back test correct. But you have to avoid something which is called curve fitting. Curve fitting is when you go and you cherry pick the data and you do little things to make your historical back test look good. But it fails in the real world because you didn't deal with the flaws or shortcomings in the system. Some systems cannot be enhanced and cannot be corrected. Because if you do it, then you basically changed the system. It's not the same system. All right. So either the system in itself is truly robust and works, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you have to be man enough to say it doesn't work. They didn't do that. There was no time in history that proved shutting down the society and closing business and just tearing up the economy worked. No precedent for that anywhere ever. It was ridiculous. Absolutely. And that's a problem that we face right now. It's because they used a flawed model with no real world experience. They had back testing, and the back testing was also flawed. It wasn't real back testing. All right. They didn't have enough data. They used very limited data. Okay. And they had no forward testing in the model. They didn't take the data and move it forward. They just didn't do that. All right. So because of that, this is the outcome. They used the real world as a guinea pig, and now they've destroyed the world. They blew the world up this time with their flawed models. Now, we talked about in the last live that we did, when we talked about modeling, I showed you where there have been many economic crises in the past because of flawed models. All right. Did we not learn anything from long-term capital management when they almost imploded the world with $1 billion trading loss that they were trying to cover up? And the entirety of their system was based on one freaking anomaly. And that is that a particular market never went to a particular sigma. So let's say, for instance, the bond market, the worst extreme was 3 sigma that happened once in the last 100 years. So they'll say, okay, so that's a 0.1% chance or 0.1% chance that that'll happen. We can do this model and just cake it. But unfortunately, when the inevitable happened and it went to like 4 or 5 sigma, they were destroyed. Margin calls they couldn't meet. Okay. That's what this is. You don't play games with real lives. There's a way to forward test even this situation. You can forward test this situation. There's ways to do it without, hurting, economies and people. But that's what they did. They put lives at risks, which is worse than the coronavirus. It would have been better for them to do nothing and let the coronavirus just do whatever it wants to do than to blow up countries because of the economic shutdowns. Poverty kills more people than a virus on a daily basis. So now the next thing we knew There was this new vocabulary shoved down our throats, and we all had to obey strangely arbitrary exhortations. Go inside. No, wait, don't go inside. Stay healthy, but shut the gyms. Go away from the virus, but don't travel. Don't wear a mask. Wait, do wear a mask. Now we can add only gather in groups if you're protesting Trump. People started believing crazy things as if we were all medieval peasants, such as that if there's a group of people or if you stand too close to someone, the bad virus will spontaneously appear and you will get infected, or that you could be a secret super spreader even if you have no symptoms. And also, you can get the virus by touching almost anything. Again, they gave paranormal qualities to the coronavirus. The coronavirus now morphed from being a virus to a cryptid. Now we have a cryptid virus, all right, that can go in and out of reality, that can shapeshift, and can magically appear if you do something it doesn't like. Oh, you left the house without a mask on? Boom. The coronavirus has now appeared to you in the form of Mothman, and he's predicting your doom because you forgot to wear a mask. A few days later, you get sick of the Roni and you die. And then emergency broadcast, coronavirus is now speaking to the world. Hi, I'm coronavirus. I just want to say that if you don't want to see me and you want to keep me pacified, I better see everybody with a mask. The person I see without a mask is on site. All right, I'm not playing with y'all. All right, if I don't see a mask, I'm on you. I'm on your top. All right, and I'm taking you out. I don't care if you're old, young, male, female. I don't care if you're a baby. I don't care if you're a day old. All right, I'm coming for you. If I don't see a baby with a mask on, I'm telling you right now, it's on site. I'm not playing. Peace, I'm out. And now the world is shook. Oh no, coronavirus has just addressed the people of the world. If we don't do what he says, he said he gonna be on our top. That's how we work. That isn't that how we're moving right now? Oh no, you don't have a mask on. You're gonna kill everyone. Hey, you're going outside. You're killing everyone. You're so selfish. We've seen commercials. We've seen DJ Khaled making a commercial saying, if you go outside, you're selfish and you're responsible for killing people. You're a mass murderer if you go outside. And you're selfish if you go outside. That should tell y'all something. Something that's truly off the stage. The sheer amount of unscientific, phony, unleashed foolishness in these terrible 3 months boggles the mind. But that's what happens in any panic, apparently. Now something has truly been bugging me these past months, and I watched the incredible unraveling of most of the freedoms we've long taken for granted. People were locked out of the churches and schools, businesses were shuttered, markets were closed, governors shoved through shelter-in-place orders meant not for disease control, but aerial bomb raids, and masks were mandatory, all while regular people who otherwise seemed smart hopped around each other like grasshoppers. My major shock is discovering how much sheer stupidity exists in the population, particularly among the political class. Like I said, there was a point in time where I said I refuse to believe that our elected officials are dumb, stupid, and incompetent. However, they are proving that they are dumb, stupid, and incompetent. I'm speechless. Okay, but if you look at a quote from Albert Camus in his brilliant book, The Plague, 1947, quote, when a war breaks out, people say, it's too stupid. It can't last long. But though a war may be well too stupid, that doesn't prevent it lasting. Stupidity has a knack of getting its way. end quote. Indeed, it is true. It was only last February when we seemed smart. We had amazing technology, movies on demand, a smartphone in our pockets to communicate with everyone and reveal all the world's knowledge. There was peace, more or less. There was prosperity. There was progress. Our medical systems worked. It seemed that only a few months ago we had it all together. We seemed smart until suddenly stupid took over, or so it seemed. Actually, we weren't smart as individuals. Our politicians were as dumb as they have ever been, and massive ignorance pervaded the population. Then, as always, what was smart last February was society and the processes that made society work in the good old days. Consider the social analytics of F.A. Hack. His major theme is that the workings of the social order require knowledge and intelligence, but none of this essential knowledge subsists within any individual mind, much less any political leader. The knowledge and intelligence necessary for society to thrive is instead decentralized throughout society and comes to be embedded or instantiated within institutions and processes that gradually evolve from the free actions and choices of individuals. What are those institutions? Market prices, supply chains, observations we make from the successful or unsuccessful choices of others that inform our habits and movements, manners and mores that work as social signals, interest rates that carefully coordinate the flow of money, which our time preference and risk tolerances, and even morals that govern our treatment of each other. All these come together to create a form of social intelligence that resides not in individual minds, but rather the process of social evolution itself. The trouble is that a well functioning society can create an illusion that it all happens not because of the process, but rather because we are so smart, or maybe we have wise leaders with a good plan. It seems like it must be so. Else, how could we have become so good at what we do? Hayek's main point is that it is a mistake to credit individual intelligence or knowledge, much less good governments with brainy leaders with civilizational achievements. Rather, the real credit belongs to institutions and processes that no one in particular controls. And to quote Hayek, he says, quote, "To understand our civilization," Hayek writes, "one must appreciate that the extended order resulted not from human design or intention, but spontaneously. It arose from unintentional conforming to certain traditional and largely moral practices, many of which men tend to dislike, whose significance they usually fail to understand, whose validity they cannot prove, and which have nonetheless fairly rapidly spread by means of an evolutionary selection, the comparative increase of population and wealth of those groups that happen to follow them," end quote. Now, I have to say something on that. It is a known fact throughout history that a lot of, like, liberal arts and things of that nature and trends and those type of fashions, you name it, it comes from the wealth effect. The more money people have, the more leisurely they become. The more money people have, the more time they have to sit and think and just analyze things. All right. And with that sometimes comes ridiculous outcomes. And then those things kind of become societal norms. Case in point, there was a time when evolution wasn't even a word, wasn't even thought of, and had no kind of weight in the scientific community prior to the 1800s. But along come Charles Darwin, who spends a lot of time standing on the beach, looking at the ocean, a lot of time looking at the sky, walking through the forest, looking at animals, and then he comes up with his theory of evolution, not based in any scientific fact whatsoever, just his mystical leanings because of all the time he had on his hands to sit and think about these things. Now, in the 1800s, I can understand people taking interest with that, but then as science and technology has progressed, you would think that it would be a long forgotten, archaic hypothesis. But nah, it still held it as scientific fact. See what I'm saying? So when you see a society with a lot of money, that's when you see a lot of just ridiculous things, and you see a lot of things that you normally wouldn't see in a poor society. Because when you're poor, you don't have time for all that leisure activity. You don't have time for all the silly stuff. You got to work because you got to eat. So those things are anomalies that you see throughout history. Now, the lockdowns took a sledgehammer to these practices and processes and institutions. It replaced them nearly overnight with new bureaucratic and police state mandates that herded us into homes under house arrest and arbitrarily assigned new categories to us: elective versus non-elective medical procedures, essential versus non-essential businesses, permissible versus impermissible forms of association, even to the point of measuring the distance from which we must be separated one from another. And just like that, via executive order, many of the institutions and processes were crushed under the boot of the political class. This happened without debate, without public forum, none of that. This is what we're doing, like it or not. And then they made it so that you couldn't argue against it because you had to do this under the pain of jail and under the pain of violence. All right. So this is where we got to. This is just really sad, but this is where we are. This is where we are. What emerged to take its place? It's sad to say, but the answer is widespread ignorance, despite having access to all the world's knowledge in our pockets. Vast numbers of politicians and regular people defaulted back to the pre-modern cognition of disease. People did this out of fear and were suddenly and strangely acquiescent to political commands. I've had friends tell me that they were guilty of this back in the day, believing that mass death was imminent, so the only thing to do was shelter in place and comply with the edicts. Unbelievable. And then to make it so bad, then they made it so that it was a jailable offense to so-called spread information about the coronavirus that went against the government narrative. You could be thrown off social media and in some cases even jailed. So we suspended freedom of speech, we suspended the Constitution, and we suspended HIPAA. The seeming intelligence that we had only in February suddenly seemed to turn to mush, to dung. A better way to understand this is all our smartest institutions and practices were crushed, leaving only raw stupidity in its place. Truth is that we as individuals are probably not much smarter than our ancestors. The reason we've made so much progress is due to the increasing sophistication of Hayek's extended orders of association, signaling capital accumulation and technological know-how, none of which are due to wise leaders in government and industry, but are rather attributable to the wisdom of the institutions we've gradually built over decades, centuries, and a millennia. Take those away, and you reveal what we don't really want to see. Looking back, I'm very impressed at the knowledge and awareness that the post-war generation had toward disease mitigation. It was taught in the schools, handed down to several generations, and practiced in journalism and public affairs. That was smart. Something happened in the 21st century to cause a kind of breakage in that medical knowledge chain, and thus did societies around the world become vulnerable in the presence of a new virus to rule by charlatans and hucksters and media howlers and would-be dictators. With lockdown finally easing, we will see the return of what seems to be smart societies and the gradual loss of the influence of stupid. But let us not deceive ourselves. It could be that we've learned nothing from the fiasco that unfolded before our eyes. If economies come to be restored eventually to their former selves, it will not be because we or our leaders somehow beat a virus. The virus outsmarted everyone. What will fix what is political broken in the political class is the freedom once again to piece back together the institutions and processes that create the extended order that makes us all feel smarter than we really are. So, in other words, what we have here is a failure to communicate. And they've shut down public debate on the issue. They've done it on purpose because that's the only way they can get control of the narrative. All right. And it's sad, but this is where we are, people. All right. I have to break this down into two parts. And that's what I do. I'll break it down into two parts. So we'll do part 2 tomorrow. We really need to take heed to how we got here and where we're going, where we're headed right now. Because right now, the way it's looking, it's not looking too good. So I had to put that out there for y'all. All right, you know what it is, PulseWaveTrading.com. All right. Only thing I can say is let's go break some bread, man. Let's go do this. Let's make it do what it do. And remember, bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. So remember to take what you can and give nothing back. And I'm out. Peace.